Hey everyone, welcome. Again, we're gonna have a nice conversation. We're gonna talk about something very important today. We're gonna talk about learning. But before we talk about learning, I wanna give you guys a little heads up. Remember, I'm gonna stay after the talk, so this is usually 10 minute, anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 minutes. I think today will be a short one. And then I'm going to stay a little bit and answer some questions. I've been getting some questions and clarifying some things. A lot of people are not very familiar with the things that we talk about sometimes, or they want an application on their personal use or some advice about other things. And so I'm staying a little bit. Also, I want to tell you that when I stay, I talk about and I expand on a lot of concepts, and I don't post those. So if you want to get some behind the scenes, some more in-depth knowledge, I would definitely stay for the Q&A after the talk. Okay, so let's talk about learning. And learning. Why do I say that this is the first step? Well, just think about it. The only way that a human being can receive information is through the five senses, right? Now, I don't want to get into a debate on ESP or anything like that. But let's suppose that that's the only way that human beings can attain information. That's the only way we learn. We listen, or we see, or we smell, or we taste, or a combination of those things, right? And we take in this information, this stimuli, in the form of, light or scent or anything, and our brain then grabs that information, that stimuli, and converts it into electrochemical signals in the brain, and interprets that, and interprets it in many different ways. One of the big findings of the last 10 or 15 years has been that, even, like, let's say you have a blind person who's never seen before, and all you got to do for them to see is, grab this wire and then hook it up to this other wire and, tie them down, right? That's an oversimplification, but let's say that's all it is. The person still not able to see, even though he's receiving the stimuli, because the brain needs to learn how to interpret those things that are coming through the retina. So this is very important. That's the number one. But that's kind of a low-level learning. What we're talking about here is learning things, getting better at something, right? So that's what learning is. And we say is the first step because really, you need to know how you learn, right? Many people already know or are familiar with the fact that people learn in different ways. And you see memes in social media saying, well, the educational system assumes that everybody learns the same way, which it does. It's one of the big flaws of the educational system. It's really one of the big flaws of educational in mass. It's very difficult to teach a lot of people using different things, right? Different devices, or mixing them. It's pretty difficult. So it's very important for us to take responsibility for our own learning. But even though a lot of people know that this is a fact, and a lot of people know that, well, yeah, I learn better by doing, or I learn better by looking at it, very visual, or I learn better by listening. A lot of times they don't put that into action, right? It doesn't translate into action, because this is a very urgent matter. It will really be. I'm not gonna make any crazy claims, but I would definitely say that this is going to be the dividing line between the haves and have-nots in the coming years, because learning is not the same thing as information. I mean, just think about it. Is there something right now that you can pause this video and go look up? Is there something you cannot find out? You can pretty much find out anything now. And we are getting closer and closer to, some people describe it as perfect knowledge. I'm not sure about that, but at least having access to the knowledge that is available instantly. I mean, it's pretty instant now, but it will become more and more and more with augmented reality, with AI. That will become a thing that we sort of always do. So, but learning is not that. Okay, it's not that. And it's very interesting to me that in a classroom, even nowadays, kids are asked to sit down in a desk and take a test and not be able to use their phones, for example. So tell me one real life scenario where you wouldn't be able to use your phone. I mean, I guess it could happen, but what I'm saying is, again, it's not learning. Is not information. This should not be what we focus in, because information is abundant. As a matter of fact, in many ways, we're drowning in information. There's too much. There's so much that it's hard to tell which one is the information that we should be looking for and which one is maybe worthless information, right? So this is not it. Learning is about, for me, I think learning is more about the questions, right? It's almost like philosophy. I was always a fan of philosophy, and I was always a fan of philosophy not because of the questions, not because of the answers that it provided, but because of the questions that it provided. Because the questions gave you deeper perception, not necessarily knowledge, not necessarily certainty. Because if you know anything about anything, you know that there's much more than you should probably learn, right? If there's a field, whatever field you've spent your life in, whether it's finance, economics, psychology, science, business, music, art, and if you really like knowledgeable about it, if you spent any time, it's like I think it's Socrates, right? That said, the more the only thing that I know is that I know nothing, right? So it really becomes that, because it is really more about the questions. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I'm sort of thinking about a lot lately is that we are no longer in the information age. And maybe we are, but we're about to transition to another age, right? Now, maybe this is true, or maybe I'm completely like delusional and wrong. But I think we're no longer in the information age. Why? Because the information age, it worked very similar to the industrial age. It worked very. Let me give you an example. Why do I think it worked very similar? Because it used to be, like if you had a mine, if you found a mine of gold, right? You would guard that mine, and you would claim it. You put a fence all around it. Create a complex, and you start selling out the gold because you found this mine, right? Now, information, I think for a long time, it was the same. You will understand something, right? You'll get a piece of knowledge, and then you'll be like, oh, wow, I have this piece of knowledge. Now I'm gonna hand out. This is no longer like that. There is still many things that you and I don't know, but increasingly there's an abundance of information. Like I said, you will be able to know everything. At least know what everybody or what the humanity has come to know about whatever you're looking at, right? So why do I think we're no longer in the information age? I think we're in the question, or starting to be in the question age, the age of questions. Okay? Now, let me give you guys a little story. Maybe you guys have seen a movie by the name of I, Robot, right, with Will Smith. It's kind of an older movie now. I, Robot, right? Now, you guys remember, if you've seen the movie, you remember that there's a doctor there that basically was the creator of this very advanced AI technology, artificial intelligence technology. He kills himself. And there's this detective that's supposed to put all the pieces together to see why that doctor killed himself. And one of the things that happens in the movie that's very interesting is that the doctor leaves this little holographic computer. It's like a little disc that the detective can put on the ground, and it projects an image of the doctor. And then the detective can ask him questions. But the hologram would say many times during the movie, it would say, "I'm sorry, my responses are limited. You must ask the right questions," right? And that's exactly the point. The right questions. This is going to be the important thing. It's not going to be to know what the circumference of the earth is, or what the state flower or animal is. These things we can look up. Even I remember even when I was studying physics and or calculus or whatever, and we had all these formulas in this little card. I always thought, this is so silly. Like it's going to be very hard for me to be able to retain these formulas in my head whenever later down the road I'm going to be needing them. I'm probably going to be looking them up, right? And that's normal. And I have a pretty good memory. I can tell you that. But even those kinds of things always seemed like a drag. It didn't seem very practical to memorize, and it's because it wasn't. That's not where it's about using that piece of information. It's not about whether you always have a hammer on you, right? You may not always have a hammer, a screwdriver, a saw on you. Maybe you're a carpenter, maybe you do. So maybe there are guys that are always dealing with these types of formulas, so they always have that formula handy in their mind in this case, or in their belt in the case of a carpenter. It's about when you have that tool, do you know how to use it? Because see, I can carry the hammer around all day, but I'm not a carpenter, I don't know how to use it. So it's more, that's the most important thing. That should be what education is about, that should be what learning is about. So it's about asking the right questions, right? Because there's such an abundance of information that if you don't know sort of where it should go, you can't ask, well, I want to know something. Okay, well, what do you want to know? Well, I don't know, something, right? That's too general. It needs to be more specific. So that's really what I think, that's a little bit of a tangent. So we're going to start a little bit more about learning here in a sec, but I think that's very important to think about it for a while. And it's one of 2 or 3 topics that I'm sort of developing as I live, that I would like to write a book about. I think that would be very interesting to write a book about that. So there it is. Now, you guys know there are different types of learning, and there are lots of guys out there that are doing a lot of stuff in the space of learning, and you guys can probably look at a lot of those videos. What I wanted to share with you was a learning model that I'm sort of learning a little bit, putting into practice. It's a Timothy Ferriss, the learning model, out of all people, and it's called the DIS learning model. Now, if you guys know, I laugh because Timothy Ferriss is the guy that wrote The 4-Hour Workweek, and if you know me, you know I don't like that book. It's not a terrible book. It's not a terrible information. I just don't like the sort of culture that it sort of is touching on, which is, look, you don't really have to work and you can make a lot of money, which I understand where it's coming from, but I don't know anybody who's truly successful who doesn't work a lot. I don't know. So but this is actually another book. He's quite a big guy, and he talks here about the DIS learning model. He calls it meta learning, right? Beyond learning, I believe that's what meta stands for. So let's talk about the DIS learning. This might be cool. Now the I actually doesn't stand for anything. I think he just kind of sticks it in just so it makes a little more sense. But the first letter is deconstruct. So the first thing you need to do to be able to learn anything effectively is to deconstruct what you are trying to learn. whether it's a language, whether it's, you know, I guess a certain skill, or the rules of a sport, of a board game, right? You got to be able to deconstruct. You got to be able to take the whole thing, take all the pieces, all the Lego pieces, and take them apart, so that you can clearly see which individual thing it is, right? I'll share it with you guys. I was sort of using this model before I knew about it, and so when I heard about it, I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So I'm gonna talk high level, then we'll go a little bit specific on how I used it actually to teach some people I was teaching Spanish to. So deconstruct is the first thing. We gotta take it apart. The next thing is you have to select. So once you have the pieces of Lego all deconstructed, then you have to select. Now, what do you select? You select those that are the most essential to learning, right? To the thing that you're trying to do. So you can always strip things down to more fundamental structure. So you select not everything, because there is no way to select everything about anything. See, when you go in and you learn anything, you are of necessity learning only certain things, right? You're not learning everything about even the simplest things. If you want to learn how to tie a tie, you're not learning every possible combination and how they're made and who came up with it, and that's not necessary, right? You deconstruct and you select. The next S is sequence. So when you sequence, is after you know the pieces, you pick the ones that are essential, like these are the ones you need, and now you're going to put them in the right places, right? That's all you're gonna do. You picked certain ones, and you're gonna put them in the right places. And the last one, which is my favorite, S, is called stakes, right? The only way you really learn is by doing this, by putting something in fire, like really testing it out, right? I can tell you that when I was first learning English, the first thing, the stakes part was, okay, go out there and like talk to a girl, right? That was the hard thing. Or, go out there and, look like an idiot in front of a group because you don't know what the heck is going on. And so that's part of it. So this is the model, okay? Now let's talk about how I use this model to teach a group of people Spanish. So again, I did this sort of like, I was thinking, what is the best way for somebody to learn Spanish, right? Now, what I did is I broke the language down, right? So what I was doing here, right, I was deconstructing the language. And so I broke the language down into, the types of words that you can have, right? You can learn nouns. You can learn verbs. You can learn adjectives. You can learn pronouns. You can learn prepositions. Let me try to write these down a little bit clearer. You can learn adverbs. So, right, you can break every language down, at least most Romance languages, lots of Western languages, down this way. So, now, out of that, which ones do I select? Right? Which ones do I select? Well, it would be silly for me to teach someone a language focusing on the nouns or the verbs. It's too much. I mean, I don't even know all the nouns in Spanish or English. You see what I'm saying? We don't know everything about everything to be able to speak it. In this case, language. We don't know everything about English to be able to speak, to communicate it, right? We already have deconstructed and selected and sequenced. We're already doing that, right? So here we go. So what I did is like, okay, let's choose some pronouns. Pronouns are like I or me or you, or she. Okay? Now, let me choose some, and so how many pronouns are there? Well, there's really not that many, if you think about it. I, me, you, she, he, right? We. It's not that many. You can memorize that. That's a list you could generally memorize. Okay? So, then I can say something like, okay, well, what about, prepositions? Prepositions are also good. A, from, to, at, under, over, all that, right? Those are prepositions. And again, it's a bigger group. It's like 20 something prepositions, that are commonly used. But you can still memorize that. So right there, just by knowing pronouns and prepositions, you started to put at least half of sentences together. You see? So now I'm going into sequencing. How do I put these together, line them up, right? So don't worry about the verbs or the nouns. There's too many. Just know a couple. That's fine. But memorize pronouns. Memorize prepositions, right? And then you just start coloring them with adjectives, right? And now what's gonna make this work? Well, remember our last S, stakes, right? One of the best ways, if you want to trade in the market, you want to know how to trade money in the market, use your own money. It's the best way. You'll learn quick. When you're losing money, you learn fast. So that's the last one. So you have to you deconstruct, you select, you sequence, and then you say, okay, I'm gonna give it a shot. And then you go out there, and if people say, what are you saying? Huh? That's good. You'll learn quick, I promise. So that's the model. I thought this was very helpful. When I finally sort of got it consciously, I was like, oh, I was already doing that. That's interesting. So I advise you guys to use this, but don't forget the way that you learn this. If you learn better by listening, if you learn better by reading, don't fight it. You have to go. But I thought I'd give you a little more, another tool, not just talking about types of learning, but also a model that you guys can use to learn. Okay, I'm gonna turn the screen around. If you want to stay and ask me some questions about the topic or about something else, feel free to do that. Remember, I don't post those, so you might want to stay and get some more insight on these helpful things. Okay, guys? Thank you.